Greetings, my name is Chris, aka ThePhilosophersGames, and today episode 4 of The Rings of Power Season 2 came out. And these are my first impressions of this episode. I watched it already, actually 2 times, and oh boy, there is a lot to unpack in this episode. So many references. So I'm looking forward to the live analysis stream we will have later this day, because we will have a lot to discuss there. A lot of references, we will look into the book quite a few times, and it is an interesting episode, I have to admit. I enjoyed it for the most part, though I felt it was a little bit fanservice heavy. I still have to process this episode, because I'm not 100% sure what to think of it. I think from watching it the first time, I had a blast watching it. I think it's a really good episode. On the other side, as mentioned, it is so fanservice heavy that they implement, like, it's kind of a best of weird things from Lord of the Rings, and they put it all into an episode. If it makes sense or not, doesn't matter as long as it's in the episode. So it goes quite a bit against the law, and I feel like they could have been a bit more elegant using these law elements, in my opinion. I actually hoped they would do this, and what this means exactly, we discuss very briefly in the next section, so spoiler warning from here. So let's start with the first kind of little negative point, in my opinion. It's a bit nitpicky, it's the Barrow Wights. Though I'm quite happy that some of my predictions were quite precise for this episode, I'm not so happy that they did not come up with a different explanation for the Barrow Wights. What they're basically doing here is using exactly what is in the Lord of the Rings. And you could think, well, it's Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. Why does it matter? Lore-wise, it matters because the Lord of the Rings plays up to 5,000 years later. So when their intention is to portray the second age of Middle-earth in this adaptation, it is strange that they make use of so many elements from the third age. Like, if you think about it, what makes the third age then special if all the elements are suddenly pulled into the second age? Why not come up with something original, something new, or maybe reference it distantly? What they are doing basically with the Barrow Wights is copy-pasting them from the third age into the second age, and I think that's a bit unfortunate. The origin story of these Barrow Downs and also the Barrow Wights possessing those is related to the War of Angmar in the Third Age. At the end of the Second Age, the kingdom of Arnor and Gondor will be found by the Dúnedain in exile. And then, at some point in the Third Age, there was a king who had 3 sons who were in a strife and could not agree on who would rule. And this led to Arnor being split into 3 kingdoms. One of that was Cardolan. And then in this context, the Witch King also came into these lands to the north and founded his own realm there, which was called Angmar. There he became known as the Witch King of Angmar, as you have probably heard from the Lord of the Rings already. And then he started a war against these kingdoms. He absorbed one of them, and he completely destroyed Cardolan. I have the theory that some of the remaining forces in Cardolan hid in the Barrow Downs. And to get them out there and to completely desert the land, he summoned spirits, evil spirits, to these Barrow Downs that possessed them. And these then became the Barrow Wights. And as a result, Cardolan was no more and completely deserted. And only one of these kingdoms were left, which was Arthedain. For example, Aragorn is from the line of this last mentioned kingdom. Of course, the Barrow Downs, even from the perspective of Cardolan, were very old. In Lord of the Rings, we find a hint that they were even created in the First Age. So yes, technically in the Second Age they were there, but it seems very strange that they were already possessed by Barrow Wights in the Second Age. That makes no sense, because when the Dúnedain came into this land, they revered this place, because not even the Edain, but the ancestors of the Edain, so before men reached Beleriand, created these Barrow Downs. As a result, they were just ancient history from the perspective of men, even in the Second Age. If it would be at least a different location and like a different origin story or whatever, Yeah, maybe, but it's also called Tyrn Gorthad, and on the map it's at the exact same location as the Barrow-Downs are in Lord of the Rings. It feels like an unnecessary repetition of history just to have the Barrow-Wights in the show as a bit of fan service, and I don't find that very elegant, if I'm honest. Speaking of fan service, this episode, and in general the show, seems to basically get every mysterious creature from Tolkien's books into this show. Like, we had Ents in this show now, we had also the mention of the nameless things, we have Tom Bombadil. If at the end of episode 4 we also had the Balrog waving into the camera and a dragon flying above the woods, and then the nameless thing giving high five to the Watcher in the water, then I guess we would have gotten pretty much everything, and most of it would have been in episode 4 then. It is a bit cheap in my opinion. It's not the end of the world, and there may be some people who enjoy that all these references to the books and all these creatures we can finally see or hear somewhere. I don't mind this as well too much, but I felt it was a bit too much for just one episode. Speaking of Tom Bombadil, I really liked his portrayal in the show. I think the actor did a fantastic job. Tom Bombadil smiled, luckily enough, quite a bit. Also sang his signature song a little bit in the background, which was pretty awesome in my opinion. But some elements of it were, again, too close to what we know already from The Lord of the Rings. Like, it's a bit too reference heavy. If you actually want to make a show about the Third Age, then maybe make a show about the Third Age and not the Second Age. Like, come up with something new. You chose the Second Age because of all these blank pages I remember from some interviews in the past. And now you copy everything from the Third Age into the Second Age because you can't come up with something new. That I don't really understand, to be honest. I also think it's a bit strange that Tom Bombadil now becomes a teacher of the Istari, of the wizards. That makes very little sense in my opinion. That's not how I imagine Tom Bombadil. He's just an exception. He has nothing to do with an order of the Valar who sent help to Middle-earth or something, then has to help them out or so. He's just a enigma in the world, and this kind of gives him a very specific purpose in the world that reduces his enigma, if that makes sense. Though I have to admit, some parts of the portrayal still try to establish this enigmatic character, which I really liked, but in the end I'm not 100% sure if I like how he's used here in this show. I think he has too much purpose in the story, if that makes sense, because that's exactly the point of Tom Bombadil, and also a lot of people complaining a bit about the Tom Bombadil chapters because they basically serve almost no purpose for the story. Still, I think what this episode does is condensing a lot of plot lines and pushing them with some force into a specific direction, and you can definitely see from this point how it will develop further, and I personally am curious how this all plays out at the end, and that's, in my opinion, a very positive thing, though it's done with a bit too much fan service, in my opinion. Also, there's a very interesting and small detail with the Sturs and the story that the Stur leader told, and she mentioned something called the Susat. And Susat is actually the in-world Westron name of the Shire. Interestingly, this name only appears, to my knowledge, in Peoples of Middle-earth. That means they might have rights to use some elements out of that book. And this would definitely allow them also to use the version where the two blue wizards in the east are successful, and also at some point confront Sauron fleeing after the War of the Last Alliance. So that's maybe interesting. But as mentioned, I want to keep this video short, so thank you for watching. Also, if you liked the video, feel free to press the like button, maybe subscribe, and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of this episode, what your theories are, and so on. And otherwise, as said, there will be a live stream later today where I go frame by frame through the complete episode and we discuss pretty much everything. So if you're interested in this and have some time, feel free to join. And there will be also other videos and content and so on. So stay tuned. Again, thank you for watching and goodbye.